Hi, this video is a quick tour to show you some of the new features and new controls in Google Meet. Before I start, I want to mention that Google's timeline to release Meet was originally summer 2020. And so when we found ourselves faced with a global quarantine, Google moved something like 80% of their software engineers and their coders over to Meet in Classroom to bring the product to market as quickly as they could so that we could proceed with online teaching and learning. So we are seeing now quite a few things rolling out into Google Meet that weren't there back in March when we first went on quarantine. So I'm going to just take you through some of these new features. The first thing I'll point out down here is the meeting details, and I think we had those in the spring. If you click on that, that gives you the joining info. So here's the link for the Google Meet, and here's the number to dial in if you're in a place where Wi-Fi won't allow for you to join through the internet. Now, we do have some families who, if they're in a rural area, maybe down in a valley, may struggle with a good internet connection, and they will be wanting to then use the dial-in so that at least they can hear you. Now, I'm going to draw your attention to the fact that this is an American number being called. And so if families are using the dial-in feature, otherwise families get a big phone bill for long-distance calling. Sounds almost strange to talk about long-distance calling. It's not much of a thing anymore in our modernized, globalized world, but in this instance, it can make a big difference. So that's just your joining info. Now we've got this shield down here, this blue shield, and that's our host controls. So the first thing on here is quick access. And so when that's turned off, everyone who isn't invited must ask to join, and that includes people in your organization. I've got that turned on so that people can join my meets freely. I've done a number with parents who don't have CESD 73 addresses, and so this just lets people come into my Google Meets. I can also choose to let people share their screen, and I can also turn the chat on and off. And so when you watch a teacher who does a lot of online or remote teaching, they become very proficient at turning the chat on and off. So when you're lecturing, go ahead and turn that off so the kids can't be chatting with each other while you're actually instructing. But then if you want to turn it back on for other reasons afterward, you totally can. Same thing with letting students share their screen. Now we're going to look at a few more settings in there so that you can see that the host controls, those are what we were just looking at. So this is just the same thing on a bigger screen. In video, it tells me what camera it's using, and there's some choices for the resolution. And you see that I've got my camera off right now because I'm just giving you a tour. I'm not actually on with anybody, so I have turned my camera and my microphone off. Under the audio settings, we have a new one here. It's called noise cancellation. It is amazing. When they first rolled this out, they shared a video with a gentleman who was crumpling paper, and you could really hear the sound of the paper. Then he turned on the noise canceling and proceeded to talk while crumpling the paper, and you couldn't hear the paper. All you heard was his voice. So the noise cancellation goes a long way for turning off some of those sounds that are in the background in our kids' homes, whether it's people talking in the background, or it's a toddler being a toddler, or it's pets that make some noise. You can turn on the noise cancellation so that when that child has their microphone turned on to speak to you, you don't have to hear all of the noise in the background of the household. Then our controls here in the center, same as they were before. We have a new one here. It's called Raise Hand. So if I hit the Raise Hand button, you see over here in the meeting details, I have raised hands and I can see who all has raised hands. The thing I can't show you is that that hand will appear on the thumbnail of the student when you've got all your kiddos tiled so you can see them all. You will see that hand on the video feed of students who have questions. And so just like when we're instructing in class, I can put my hand up. Now, if as you're teaching me, you answer the question that I had, as a student, I can just click that off, and now my hand is not up anymore, because that happens when we're teaching. We're talking away, kid puts up their hand, and you've had the moment, you say to them, just give me a second, I might be about to answer your question, and often that's exactly what happens. Of course, we've got our Present Now button. That was there in the spring when we were fully quarantined. And we, of course, had this kebab menu with some more options as well. So I'm going to click on the kebab, and you'll see we have a few things in here that were there before, and we have some things that are new. And now I want to look at a few of these. So the first one is whiteboard, and it says open a jam. That's going to open Google Jamboard, which I have a video about Jamboard. So if I had a set of Jamboard, they're basically like slides. If I had those ready in advance, I could choose them from my drive. Or if I'm instructing and I'd really just need a whiteboard to show these kids what I want them to do, it's going to open what we call Google Jamboard. And so I've got pen tool and eraser tool, select. I can put a sticky note on here, bring in a picture, draw some shapes, type some text. So basic teaching and learning tools are right there. Now I'm not using a touch screen, so I'm going to be doing my math here with my mouse. But if I was using a touchscreen Chromebook, I could definitely run my finger along the screen or run my stylus along the screen to really make this an interactive and powerful ability to teach. It's just like having your whiteboard at the front of the room or chalkboard, whatever analogy works for you. This is that type of thing. Up here, it'll take me through the frames. So I can hit the button off to the right. Now you see I'm on 2 out of 2, and I can see the thumbnails of my whiteboard. So this is a great way to be able to just in the moment teach with a whiteboard if you needed one. And they've built it in, which makes it super easy to just grab the whiteboard if you understand that these kids are not quite understanding what I'm trying to explain to them. You can just real quick click on your kebab down here and open a jam. Record meeting, that was there before. We've got the change layout now. And so we can tile up to 49 people out of the box. So without an extension now, I can tile up to 49 people. Which brings me to the point that if you still have that grid view extension installed, you're going to want to get rid of it. When Google built this into Meet, the guy who made that extension stopped updating it. And so it causes a whole bunch of glitches and problems now. So you'll want to get rid of that grid view extension if you still have it in your Google Meet or in your extensions for your Chrome. We've got the ability to change the background or to blur the background. And that was a feature that Zoom had that they got a lot of requests for because it allows you to be in a space that is your personal space, but you can blur the background out. So if you're teaching from home and you really don't feel like your kids need to see your home, you can blur your background or you can change it to something else. It operates on green screen type technology, and so it's not perfect. My white hair sometimes looks like it's cut off a little bit, so it's not perfect, but definitely if you're in an environment where you just don't want the kids to see the details of where you are, that's a great one to use. I will mention that when students are using it, if they're on a device that is a little bit short on some CPU usage, that one can really start to lag them. So if you have a student who's complaining about lag time or something like that, check their background, because if they're using this on a computer at home that's maybe a little bit older or it hasn't been tended or tidied in terms of the hard drive space in a while, that one can really cause them some frustration. So that's just a quick mention. Odds are it'll be just fine. And then down here, of course, we've got our ability to report a problem or troubleshooting and help. So if you have something in mind that you really would like to see rolled out into Google Meet, do send them that feedback. I know they pay attention to this stuff, and and it helps inform them with what we need out there in the field. So that's the basics of the bottom controls, but we've got some new stuff up top here as well. So I've got the Show Everyone tab, just like I had before. I've got the Chat tab, and you'll see it's there. So I've got the Everyone, the Chat, and then there's this new one with the triangle, square, and circle. That was not there in the spring. When I click on that, I've got some new things. I've got breakout rooms, I've got polls, and I can do a question and answer. So it's an easy way to ask questions. So if I go to breakout rooms, I have to hit this edit button to start to create breakout rooms. So I'm going to click on it. And by default, it's going to start me with 2 breakout rooms. If I need more than that, I can add more. It's not going to give me less than 2, because anything less than 2 is just the main call anyways. I can rename the breakout rooms by just clicking in and typing. So group 1, group 2. I can have it shuffle the kids into groups, so totally random. Or if they were working together in groups, I could drag them into their groups. And when I've got things the way I want them, I'm going to click Open Rooms. So if I had a class in here and I had dragged them into the groups that I wanted them, or I had shuffled them in, when I click Open Rooms, they're going to get a pop-up on their screen that says something to the effect of, you have been invited to join breakout room called Group 1, and they can accept or refuse. Well, if you've asked them to work in groups like you would do in your classroom, they're going to accept, because you're just pushing them into breakout rooms. And then as they're working in their breakout rooms, you're going to just want to cycle through. Drop in with group 1 for a few minutes, drop back out. Drop in with group 2 for a few minutes, back out. There isn't, at this point in time, there isn't a solid way for kids who are in a breakout room to be able to summon you or ask you a question. So the easiest way is for you to just kind of circulate as you would in a classroom. When I'm all done, I can clear it, and that'll put everybody back into the main call. There's also a timer on here. So if you're giving them 10 minutes to do something, you can set that timer, and after the timer has expired, the breakout rooms are going to end and everybody comes back to the main meeting again. So that's a really excellent new control that we've got in our Google Meet. With polls, you could take a quick opinion poll. It may be related to the curriculum you're delivering. It might be a poll like, after we get back to face-to-face learning after Christmas time, I think we need to take some time to reconnect. And then maybe you give them 3 options of a special activity that you have in mind. Something like that. You can use the polls in numerous ways. And then finally, we've got the question and answer field. And so this is where kids can ask questions, and you might respond to them during the lesson, or you might look at them afterwards. You will be sent, if kids have asked questions through this mechanism, you will be sent an email afterwards that contains a spreadsheet that lists their questions. So you would be able to go through their questions and then respond to those tomorrow when you meet again. So we've got the question and answer, we've got the polls, we've got the breakout rooms. And when I close that, it just brings me right back to this main screen here, which is my main call screen. Now, in terms of glitches, we do have a couple glitches. One of them is if you are using the link that Google Meet puts into Google Classroom, those are straight up glitchy. I would say don't use those. Go in the setting on your Google Classroom. So open the class, go to the gear in the top right-hand corner and turn that off. Those ones are glitchy, and being the first one into your Google Meet does not necessarily give you the controls you require. So you'll want to generate a Meet a different way. And I'm going to show you how to do that. The other glitch we get is Meets that have nicknames. You would think that adding a nickname would make it more stable. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be that a Meet link that has a nickname does some weird things like expiring. So I'm going to tell you how I created my link. I have used the same Google Meet link since March. Every time I use this, I now get the attendance reports after the meeting, which brings me to the question of how do you get the attendance reports? There isn't anything that you do per se to get those. They're in a rollout phase, and I am finding that I'm getting them more consistently than I was a couple of weeks ago, but it does tend to be a little bit hit and miss still. So sometimes you might get an attendance report after a Google Meet, and sometimes you might not. It's nothing you did, it's just a gradual rollout. So to create my Google Meet link, I went to meet.google.com and I chose join or start a meeting. I did not give it a nickname. I just hit continue. And I gave it a minute to create the meet. And then what I did was I came up here and I just copy pasted this address. And I've used it since March the 15th. It's in the signature of my email. I've actually also put it on my staff profile on the district site so that when somebody contacts me with a question, if it's easier to respond through a video conference, I'll just respond with, click on my Google Meet link and my signature and I'll meet you there and we can talk about it. And it has really simplified workflow for me. Now, one thing to mention with this is when you're using Google Meet, you can now kick a kid out. So if I've got a student who is causing me some problems, I can eject them from the Google Meet. We could do that back in the spring, but the challenge was they could just keep coming back in and coming back in and coming back in. Not the case anymore. Once a person has been kicked out of a Meet twice, they cannot come back in. So my background as a junior high teacher, if I use this Meet link over and over and over, on the day that I have to kick the same kid out twice, that kid will never get back into my class again if I continue to use this Meet link. So at that point, when my criteria for readmitting that child back into my virtual classroom had been met, then I'd need to create a new Meet link because that child would be permanently unable to access this link. So that's kind of the ins and outs of Google Meet with some of the new features right now. I know this was a really quick overview. Thanks for watching.